Welcome to the Metamorphosis Project Podcast. I'm your host, Tina Eichenberg, and this is a space where transformation begins. Here, we dive deep into energy healing, self-care, and the power of mindset to help you break free from old patterns and design a life that feels aligned, vibrant, and authentically you. Each week, we explore the tools, techniques, and real-life experience that guide us toward lasting healing and growth. Because true metamorphosis isn't just about change. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Now, let's get into this week's conversation. All right, so we're going to get into the interview for this week. And this week, I have the pleasure of interviewing Terri-Ann. And she is you're a 3 times Reiki master, is how I read your bio.
Yes, Usui, Karuna, and Lightharian Reiki. I've been trained in them all. I feel like I'm a lifelong student.
I think we all are. Oh, I think we need to be in order to not become stagnant.
Yeah.
But I had really only heard of the first one.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I did not know that there were different kinds of Reiki,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
as an energy healer, you know, we often think that, oh, everybody knows. Well, I mean, everybody knows what we know. That's
Right.
I think everybody comes from that perspective. Like everybody should know what's in my head.
Everybody should
But
know about Reiki by now.
right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I know what Reiki is. I've practiced Reiki. I've got my certification in Reiki, but I didn't know that there were different types of Reiki because that wasn't my focus of
Right.
my learning. So I didn't go down that rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
at any time.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to find out that there are different kinds, and I'm sure that they all work in different ways.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
but I want to hear how Reiki came into your life and how it helped you to transform through your journey. Like what was the precursor, what was that pinnacle point, and take us to now. So yeah, take it away. Let me hear your story.
Absolutely. Great question. So I have been a lifelong learner. I grew up very strict Catholic in New York with an Italian family that we did the laying of the hands. So I understood what that meant as a child. Not until much later in life would I be drawn to Reiki. I had a sick daughter. I had her at 40 years old, and she was born ill. And she had 3 intestinal surgeries, and she bled internally for 3 years. So
Mm.
we were through all the traditional medicine. We saw all the best specialists in the country, and either nobody would do surgery on her or they didn't, it was too risky. She was too small. There was always a reason. And the last one sort of put me through a loop. We traveled all the way to Minnesota, and she went through all this rigorous testing, testing upon testing. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this to her. And then monthly blood transfusions. So every month we'd go to the hospital. She'd be bleeding, her hemoglobin would drop. Um, they couldn't pinpoint where, they couldn't find where. And obviously, to do the surgery was too risky.
Right.
So every month we'd go for blood transfusions just to keep her healthy and alive. After about 3 years, I was like, enough is enough. I mean, she would scream and cry, and it was so traumatic for the both of us. And I started to look for alternative ways, and I prayed to God. I had just begun meditation because I was going through this nasty divorce, and I had needed a way to sort of relax myself, right? I was under tremendous stress. And as I started meditating, I started receiving messages. And oh,
Yeah, my cats like to come up
mine
during
too.
interviews and healings. I have
Yeah.
3, and 2 of them
Oh,
in particular
wow.
like to come up and join in.
Absolutely. So I received a message about Reiki, and I looked into it. And very selfishly, I was going to just do Reiki 1 and 2 just to be able to heal her. It took about a year, and she had no blood transfusions. And finally, after 5 years, they released us. She's 8 years now. She's 15. 8 years hospital free.
Aw, I
Yeah,
love
and I
that.
do and I do Reiki volunteer work at the hospital now. Whereas when they first heard about that 8 years ago, they were like, "No way, it's not possible." And I'm
Right.
like, "Well, everything traditional medicine had done had failed her. Yes, blood transfusions kept her alive, but that did not give us a fix for what we needed.
Right.
But energy healing is what healed her." And what I found was my transformation began, right around that time as well. I had a near-death experience not long after, and my life shifted and changed. So as I look back on it now, today, so many things that have happened have drawn me. And I fell in love with the world of energy healing. I have to be honest. Like, Reiki, like you said, I did Usui, Karuna, and Light Therian Reiki. And I started with Usui Reiki, became a Reiki master teacher. That took me a while. I went straight in head first to Karuna Reiki, Holy Fire. I fell in love with the energy there too. And then when I found Light Therian Reiki, it was not long after my son had passed away
Oh,
from a similar condition that my daughter had.
I'm
So
so
there's
sorry to hear that.
Thank you. So there's no coincidences. I mean, that was actually a preparation for me to prepare what I was going to be doing
Yeah.
and how I would be working through all of that. So my transformation has been long. It has been arduous. It has been a struggle. And I'm finally at a point in my life where I can really see and look back at the perspective of that all needed to happen to get me to the place that I am today.
Now, did you think that way when you were going through
No.
it? No,
Absolutely not.
no.
I was in the same, place that I had always been, the way I was raised. This isn't fair. Why is this happening? I must have done something wrong. I must have been a horrible person that, I would have a sick daughter born or that my son would pass away from a similar condition. And how could I not know? And I went through guilt and regret. And it took me, going through that whole process of healing myself in the interim, right?
Yeah.
I had so much work to do. I came in with a lengthy list, I say, of things that my soul wanted to accomplish.
Some friends and I have a joke that healing is like a CVS receipt. It just goes on and on and on.
Yes.
And you can't always know what is on that list. Like it would be great if we could, wake up one day and go, "Oh, okay, here is my healing to-do list. I got to
Yes.
heal my mother wound that goes back 12 generations because my mother's mother wasn't nice to her and my mother's mother's mother wasn't, and oh, and there's this father wound and oh, and there's this, this belief that I brought over from this past life. So it's it'd be great if we had that to-do list to go through, but as humans, we are not privy to that.
No, and I love when people say that they had a great childhood, right? Their childhood was wonderful and they have no trauma. And I'm like, uh-huh. Like, go back and really pay attention to some of those things because it could be very simple, right? I mean, your mother could have said, "I don't have time for you right now."
Yep.
It could have been something so simple, but that really set the path for your life, thinking that you're not worthy. You're not worthy of your mother's time. How could you be worthy of anybody's time? So I don't think people realize that, yes, that is part of trauma too. And if you look at that in the big picture, how you do your relationships, your career, how you raise your children, your family, that all begins back then when you were a child. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I tell my kids all the time, well, probably not all the time, but I understand that I I helped to create some of the trauma that they are still holding on to.
wow,
And,
yes,
and
I feel that way.
I think that's a responsibility that we as parents need to take.
Yes. So I have older children. I was 21 when I had my first son, and I had three sons back to back, and Anthony was my middle one that passed. I raised them differently than I raised my daughter, who I had at 40, who I had now began to have a spiritual awakening at that time. So, my son will even say to me today, my youngest son, like, you treat her so different. She gets away with everything. You don't tell her. And I'm like, I'm really sorry that I was the way that I was when I raised you because I was not healed. I did not know.
Right.
And just acknowledging that for him he's like, wow, yeah.
Right. Because it's you have to, we as parents have to apologize for what we did do. Even if we, even if we're coming from a place of, I don't, a lot of parents will come from the place of I didn't do that. I tried to be the best parent I could be.
Right.
But the perception that your children have of you is completely different than the perception of that you have of yourself.
Yes.
And you can, I don't think my parents ever thought that early on that their relationship impacted me and my siblings. There are times when my mom would say, you didn't see us fighting.
Right.
You didn't hear us fighting. And it's like, well, no, maybe I didn't hear that fight that you had 3 days ago because I wasn't home. But when I came home, I could certainly feel that there was
Yes.
tension between you. I could
Yeah.
certainly see the looks that were given to each other. And that stuff sticks with our kids just as much as being there in the room when the event was happening.
Absolutely. And especially as an empath or an energy healer, when you go back and you look at that and you say, oh my gosh, that was my empathic side, right? Because I was always very clairsentient. I could always feel so much from everybody.
Hmm.
And it really took a toll on me as a child because even those things that were not said could be felt. And so you would take it on, right? I could see visions or hear things that maybe were going on that I wasn't supposed to know or hear, but yet
Right.
here I am as a sentient being, right? I'm able to hear, see, feel, and know all of these things that maybe I shouldn't have known as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's pretty amazing what happens when we become more aware of what we've been through and we take responsibility for the healing that we need to do.
Yes. And I still say I'm healing. I am not
Yeah.
healed. So
No.
I will still make mistakes. I will still yell at my daughter sometimes, on a tirade and catch myself, right? Because now I'm aware of it, but I can catch myself. I can't always stop myself. And I try not to be hard on myself. I'm still learning too, right? This is a journey for me. And I try to explain that to her. This is a journey for me as well. I've never done this before. I've never done this before with you, although we may have done it in a different life because I know she was my mother in another life. I am still learning in this life.
Yeah. Yeah. You've never been the parent of a 15-year-old girl before.
Exactly.
And when it comes to your sons, you've never been the parent of a 30-year-old before. So
Right.
we are new parents every day, just like our kids are new children every day.
Yes.
So what would you say that your children are learning from you in this moment, like in this time in their lives? Right? Because your 15-year-old, she's almost an adult. She's a pre-adult. And your boys are grown, so they're what, in their mid-20s?
30s. My
They're
oldest is 34.
okay, wow.
Yeah.
You do not look like you have a 34-year-old.
Oh, thank you. I am growing my gray out. You'll start to see it. I've come to a point in my life where I really love myself and I
Yeah.
love my gray and I'm embracing my gray. So I may look like I am the mother of a 34-year-old soon, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I let mine grow out 2017. I cut it
Oh,
all off
wow.
into a pixie
I
cut
love it.
and
Mm-hmm.
let it grow out. And I love my gray hair. I love the comments I get when people are like, I love the highlights in your hair. I'm like, thanks, they're natural.
Yeah. And you have beautiful color for it too, so
Well, thank
it
you.
works.
Thank you very much. Um, but what have you noticed that your kids have learned from you in the last couple of years of going through this healing process?
Well, it's funny because we've had the death of Anthony in the midst of all this. My older children, so my daughter was 9 when he passed, and my children were older. Um, my boys struggled immensely with understanding about life after death. And my oldest son, honestly, he's atheist. So he doesn't believe there's anything after you die. And I don't try to change his mind.
Right.
Um, I allow him to have his experiences and his knowledge because he was still younger at that time. That was almost 6 years ago. So he was 28, almost 29 when Anthony passed. He's 34 now and he's expanded and grown. He's had
Yeah.
more life experiences to understand different things. Um, so it is a process. I feel like they definitely learn how to be more resilient in knowing that how to be open-minded, right? You want to be open-minded to understanding that you don't always have the power to control everything. So very much a control, a rigid parent to them when they were young, a type A personality. So it's funny to see them now as that type A personality, right? And I'm
Yeah.
so different from that, from the person that I was then. I can sort of look at it and go, oh, hey, yeah, that's your type A. That's your control freak side, you know. Um, but then they see the other side of me now. And I think because there's things that they don't understand, such as energy healing, right? My energy speaks for itself. So when I'm around them, now my energy is different than my energy was then. So my energy now is much more relaxed and peaceful. And I
Yeah.
think they feel that. They've said that to me, you know, you're such a different person now. You're so much more. And you can equate it to the divorce that I had, you know, 10 years ago or, you know, my new marriage. You can equate it to whatever, but I've done a lot of intensive work during that time to become in a place that I'm much more calm and peaceful. I'm much more happy being in that place.
Yeah. Well, one thing I don't think that people on the outside uh, realize is that when we are healing, we attract better things into our lives because we've healed aspects of us that are no longer attracting the other parts.
Yes.
And so, had you not done the healing that you were doing, you might not have attracted the better marriage.
Yes.
You know,
It's
there are people
funny to
who,
see.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny to see like how totally different my life my life looked really happy at the old times, right? You can look at pictures, but within my eyes, you don't see any happiness. I have the fake smile. I had the perfect family, the, you know, 3 kids, a house, the car, everything. I had everything that you could ever want, right? I had a career, but I wasn't happy. And you can see that when you look at my eyes. And today, I live much more minimalistically.
Mm-hmm.
And you look in my eyes and you see a happiness and a peacefulness that you could not see back then.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's
It's been a
awesome.
beautiful, I always say, like Anthony would tell me in spirit, because I have a big connection with him after he passed right away. And he would tell me that out of this pain is going to become beauty. And he
Mm-hmm.
would show me the lotus flower and he would show me it blossoming and who I would become and how I would become into myself, right? I was just turned 55. So I'm becoming this whole new person now, right? It's a 5 and 5 is a 10. It's a 1. It's a new beginning for me. I'm beginning a new cycle in my life. So he was absolutely right.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So I want to go um, back to the Reiki. Explain to our listeners a little bit of the difference between the three and how you bring all three of them into your work. Because I'm assuming that you use all three of them kind of combined.
Well, from what I have gathered and the way that I've learned and grown from it is they've been like rungs on a ladder. So I don't always incorporate all three into what I'm doing. And because I've learned so many different modalities as well, I've learned theta healing, I've learned hypnosis, I've got my degree in psychology. I've done a bunch of different things. I've learned about the emotion code and body healing and yoga nidra and breath work. So not everything do I incorporate into every session that I do, but Reiki specifically, um, it's funny because when I do Reiki with private clients versus when I'm doing Reiki in a hospital per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a hospital setting, they don't want us to give them any information about any information that we receive. And it's much more restrictive in that
Right.
area. So I generally just use my Usui Reiki, do the basic, and, go from there. When I work with my private clients, I'm much more in tune to what they need at that time. So I very rarely use symbols anymore. I mainly use my Theta-Healing Reiki, which is just the energy of who I am, right? That bright light that I've now gained access to as I've raised my frequency high enough to be in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do still use symbols when I go into rooms. If I go into somebody's house to do a blessing, I'll use symbols. There's many rituals that I do. And there is a difference in everything that you do. Usui Reiki, for example, with the symbols, each symbol means different things. Same thing in Karuna Reiki, there's symbols, but each symbol means something different
Mm-hmm.
for that person. So it just may be really what I'm tuning into. I always tune in before I meet with a client and see exactly what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. If it's Theta Healing, maybe, and I'm not doing any Reiki at all, I'm just using
Right.
Theta Healing, I wouldn't use Reiki at all. So I think when you grow on your path and you have all these modalities under your belt, you really get to be able to be in a place where you're able to tune into that energy
Mm-hmm.
and see exactly what it is you should be using. Because say somebody comes to me for Reiki, but I'm not really guided to do Reiki. And may say, well, Theta, I see you have a lot more deepening beliefs, limited beliefs that keep you stuck. And can we talk a little bit about that? Because yes, I can do Reiki and I can sort of remove some of that stuckness in that area, right? But it's not going to go as deep as Theta might go, where we're really digging into what those lower level beliefs are.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that that you're able to take a step back and see that maybe whatever they come to you for is not what's going to help them the most.
Yes. And to be
Right.
able to say that, I don't know in the beginning if I could really say that because I was much more I was like, I don't even know how any of this is going to work. Like it was a miraculous journey and
Yeah.
everything came as I started the Reiki and I began to heal those things within myself. A lot more of those limited beliefs, fell away. The first time I did a Reiki client who was in India, and I was so in my head about how is this going to even possibly work? It was over Zoom, and I was like, there's no way this is going to
Yep.
work. Like, I must lose my mind. But it
Yep.
did, and it was wonderful. And so, yeah, a lot of things like that have fell away as I've progressed on my journey.
That's great. That's
Yeah. Do you
great.
find that as well?
I do. I
Hmm.
do. I find that, it's, I mean, I think that comes from a place of, sometimes when we do step out of our comfort zone, that we are able to do more, right? It's
Yes.
like when, I'm not, and I still find myself sometimes not wanting to do it. A lot of times I find myself not wanting to do it, but doing reels and
Hmm.
video to put out. Um, I often don't feel like I want to do that. It's not what I want to do because I do sometimes fear that judgment. But the more that I do it, the easier it gets, and the more that judgment falls away. Even though I've
Yes.
worked on it energetically from several different directions, it's more in my path that it is something that I'm supposed to, on a conscious plane, have
Hmm.
to face and work through.
Yeah.
Which is why I always tell people you can't just do the energy work. You can't just do the mindset work. You can't just do the physical work. You have to incorporate all of it together. And when you do that, you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
But a
And
lot of
that's a
people don't
process as
understand that.
well, right? Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
process as well because, originally I just never really understood the power of grief within the physical body. Because when Anthony passed, I had lost my grandparents who was in their 90s. I had never met anybody that had lost a child. I was surprised at the physicality that my body held, the pain. It felt like somebody was sitting on my chest. I couldn't breathe. So that's really when I started to get in to learn more about the body and how the body plays
Hmm.
a role also, and how we really need to have that mind, body, soul connection.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't just do one or the other, because spirituality comes easy to me, right? I could do that all day, you know.
Yeah.
Mind is easy too, because I love the mind. I've delved into psychology for many years, but the body for me has been my struggle.
Yeah, because you know, one story that comes to mind is um Christopher Reeve's wife, Dana.
Hmm.
I think her name was Dana Reeves. And within 18 months of him passing, she passed away from lung cancer. And
Yes,
she didn't smoke a day in her life. But she developed lung cancer out of the grief
out of the grief.
that she had for losing her husband and not giving herself adequate time to process that grief.
Yeah,
I don't know how long she stayed out of the limelight, but it wasn't very long that she was then back in the limelight, with his foundation and his work and continuing to keep that going.
yeah,
So, you can't put a time limit on grief, and it
no,
will show up in the most inopportune times. But when it shows up, you really do have to make yourself aware of what's happening and allow yourself to process it. And, there are a lot of people who will say, it's been 5 years. You really have got to get over this.
right.
And it's like you can't just tell someone to get over their sadness. It's
Yeah,
something that they have to work through. Sometimes it might take 6 months, sometimes it might take 10 years.
yeah. And
But
unless you've experienced that type of loss, you don't know. I mean, I've had people say to me too, "You have other children." Yeah, I do have other children. And how would you feel if you lost one of yours? It's very
yeah,
easy to say I have other children. Of course, I don't know I have other children, right?
right.
Of
Yeah,
course I do.
I have not thankfully lost a child. I do know a couple of my friends have lost children. Um, and the only thing that comes to mind when you said that was after I had my twins, I wanted to have my tubes tied. I was 23 years old. And the
Hmm.
doctor said, what if something happens to one of your kids? And I said, I can't replace my children with other children.
Right.
That's, I was so taken back those were the words that came out of
Yeah.
a doctor's mouth
Yeah. Just
to,
have
to
another
try to
one.
prevent me from tying my tubes because I was
Hmm.
done having children.
Wow. Crazy. That
But
is
yeah, I
crazy.
mean, yeah, unless you go through it, I have no
Yeah.
idea what you and my friends have had to go through.
It's
But I
been a
have,
process. Writing has been very cathartic for me, and that's why I began, right? I never thought I would be a writer. I am so different than my son, and he went to college for communications and journalism, and he always wanted to write a book. So his
is this
book came through
Anthony?
me. Yes.
Okay.
His book came through me, his first book, and it was very cathartic. He told me to begin writing, and that was only about 2 months after, 3 months after he passed. And so I began writing out of necessity. It really helped me when I would connect with him, and I would write and I would journal about all of these things I was feeling. So his book is very raw and emotional. You feel that pain that I was feeling within the words that I'm writing. It's transpired over time because there are days. His birthday is particularly difficult for me, as his mother, and because this connection I have with him, I feel him immensely. And
Yeah,
his birthday, it doesn't go away because it's been almost 6 years. you know um,
right.
it's something I'll probably work through for the rest of my entire life. And in spirit, he'll say the same thing. Well, next time I'll be the mom, and I'm like, it's not the same thing.
Right. Oh. Well, I
Yeah,
hope that I hope that you're able to celebrate him on those days
I
as well.
am. We really do try. The first couple of years, I was down and out. I would be in my bed all day crying.
Yeah.
It was just something I had to go through, and that process took me a while. There was a lot to let go of, and
Yeah.
it wasn't easy for me. And today, I still There's days that I cry. I still
Yeah.
work through my grief. There's things that will happen, like my son moving to Texas. It was such a big event for everybody. And he wasn't there physically, but he's there spiritually, and we feel it. And people in my family have really begun to open up and understand, like, oh, like when I did see that owl, that was Anthony, like, because he comes through owls for my family. So at big events, you will see an owl. He will let you know that he's there. And so it's nice to see that my family is starting to notice those things as well. They're starting to understand that that's what that
Starting to
is.
open up. Yeah. It does take some time when your family um is not on the same path as you,
Yes.
right? It can being on these healing journeys can feel incredibly lonely when the rest of your family either doesn't believe in what you're using or believe in what you're saying. They still support you. They still want to see you be healthy and be happy and be well. But when you don't have somebody to kind of talk things through with
Yeah. Yeah.
on this kind of level, it can make healing feel incredibly lonely.
Yeah, and I think that was the process for me, honestly, because when I wrote my second book, Reaching for You with Mother Mary, it was a year of writing all of these things, right? All the transmissions that came through, and then
Mhm.
another entire year of transforming through that. So that was really a lot of time that I spent in solitude. I needed to spend that time alone so that I could do the healing that I needed to do that would bring me out the other side. So yeah, in healing, sometimes there is a lot of solid alone time.
Absolutely. Terri-Ann, thank you so much for coming on to share your story. What are the names of both? Do you only have the two books?
I have three now.
Okay, what
Um,
are the titles and where can they find the books?
so From Death to Life, The Incredible True Story of Anthony Joseph is on Amazon. Reaching for You is the Crystalline Light series. That's the first in a series of three books that'll be produced. That's on Amazon. And then Life After Death is my final book that I just did. And that is the past life regressions of people that have done past life regressions with me that have gone to the in between in a session. So they talk about life after death. And that's on Amazon as well.
That's awesome. And where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, they can find me on Linktree. Look up Linktree, Terri-Ann Russell. I'm on there. That has access to all of my scheduling, all of my books, all of the events that I do.
Beautiful. And all those links will be in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Metamorphosis Project podcast. I hope today's episode brought you inspiration, joy, and a spark of empowerment. Remember, transformation is an incredible journey, and every single step you take towards self-care and healing brings you closer to the life you truly desire. If this episode uplifted you, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us to share this journey of hope, resilience, and joy with many listeners. For more tips, support, and inspiration, come and visit us at designyourexistence.com. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, and keep shining brightly. You are absolutely worth every bit of love and care you give to yourself. Take care, stay joyful, and be well.